We're back once again. I want you to tell me about these glasses and how they're working for you. Do I if I can wear these glasses? I want to know what you guys think about the glasses before we get into anything else here. But let's see. Who's here? When you're here, drop a comment in the chat if you're here. Drop a comment in the chat if you're here. I'm on that Grim Hood kick with the blue blocker glasses. But seriously, you're in here. Drop a comment. Drop a comment in the chat, and we'll get this going. So we get the usual 20. We'll get this going. I'm gonna try to keep this one very focused. You know, there's so much to cover, but I feel like only the main developments are what really matters. So drop a comment in the chat. Drop a comment in the chat. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Drop a comment in the chat if you're here. Drop a comment in the chat if you're here. Let's go, let's go, let's go. I want to hear what's going on with you guys. There we go. What's up, Vic? What's up, my man? Good to see you again. Drop a comment in the chat if you are here. Hey, thanks, Green Mountain Bear. Appreciate that. The kind words from Klaus. It's good to hear from good old Klaus. Verk, what's up, brother? If you guys are here, drop a comment in the chat. Drop a comment in the chat. J-Dog, what's up, brother? All right. We got that magic 20. All right, so first things first, of course, you got my blue blocker sunglasses. Not sunglasses, but so Rudy knows about this, the raw optics. He knows about the raw optics. Yeah, man, it's certainly a look. It's certainly a look. It's everything is very green looking. I gotta say, it's very green looking, but I'm gonna get used to it. I didn't get the night ones. I only got the day ones. I didn't go for the full investment. But let's jump right into this. So, like I mentioned earlier on, maybe some of you guys hadn't jumped on yet. I don't want to go too much into the weeds. What I want to do with this COVID cabal is I want to try to tie together a lot of threads. And I don't know what you guys think, but it seems very likely to me that we are heading to a denouement. Let's start off by saying that, I don't know if some of you guys know Martin Geddes. Martin Geddes he's a very intelligent guy based in the UK, computer programmer, but he was big in the Q movement, and he was really good at elucidating a lot of it in like a very logical way, like, not like a lot of the Q-tard people, getting a little bit out there in the weeds. He was very much on point. and was always a very clear communicator. He got banned like many, many other people during the big post inauguration, post Jan 6 purge on Twitter. And so he's kind of like off out in the wilderness now, so to speak. I mean, he still has obviously his audience because he was big enough, but he had a really nice post recently, and he was talking about the waiting, and how we've been waiting at this point. Feels like we've been waiting forever. It almost feels like a lifetime that we've been waiting here for things to change, and to the point that it's almost become part and parcel of being awake with waiting over this, coming up on 2.5 years. And I think that period is starting to come to an end. I can just say that there's been so many internal shifts I've been seeing going on with myself and with other people. It's been really profound this summer, and it feels like it's an initiation of sorts of preparation. But even beyond all that kind of woo-woo stuff, what we're looking at right now, I mean, it is really hard to see. I mean, things are just coming to a head. They're just coming to a head. And I can tell you that, of course, what's on everybody's mind is the Pelosi flights. And what just happened in Taiwan is, to me, the equivalent of what happened in January when Kamala Harris mentioned that Ukraine could join NATO, maybe should join NATO. And when Ukraine, in a press conference, talked about getting nuclear weapons. I mean, they didn't say we want to get nuclear weapons, but what they said was to revisit the 1993 Accord, which was when they got rid of nuclear weapons. So that people who actually know what they were talking about know what they were talking about. And when all this stuff went down in January, we had a war in February. Okay? So I think that we are going to be seeing the same stuff happen in Taiwan. Now, there's a lot of people who think it's not going to go that far. It's not going to go that far. And I'm going to piece together a couple of the different threads here. So let's start by saying what Juan 07 thinks. Now, I will say this about Juan. I love Juan. And I think that he has unique insights in the stuff that's going on the ground in the U.S. And I think he's got some interesting secret intelligence stuff. I don't think that Juan, or he's not doing it, but I'm sure he can grasp it. He's very intelligent. But when he talks about this stuff in these geopolitics, he's not talking like somebody who understands geopolitics would talk. I'm not saying he doesn't understand it, but, for instance, he's putting the line out there that Russia only invaded Ukraine for the biolabs. Now, look, I think that there were biolabs, and I think that it's very plausible that these biolabs were developing Slav-specific bioweapons, but that is not the only reason that Russia invaded Ukraine. And he made a comment on a few shows ago that was just inane, that Russia had pulled back from the main areas and was now only in the south because of, they had dealt with the biolabs. It doesn't make any sense at all. A lot of those biolabs were in like western Ukraine, and they may have been hit by missile strikes, but so I mean, a lot of the stuff he was saying just didn't make any. It showed a lack of understanding of, like, too far off in the weeds, let's say, not ascribing enough other motives, which is maximalist vision for Russia to break the Western financial system and to reunite Slavic, especially the Russian parts of Ukraine, to Russia. Okay, so that was all stuff that he missed there. Similar point that he made today, which was very interesting, is he was talking about Pelosi going to Taiwan. And he was talking about Pelosi going to Taiwan in the context of her trying to essentially position herself in a presidential manner. that she's actually acting like the president. And it is interesting that for all this stuff about Pelosi, not getting the backing of the White House, the video I saw of her coming off the plane, and maybe they picked it from a different location, but that she was flying in Air Force One. So I was very confused about that. So someone needs to confirm that for me. But when I saw the video, I'm like, that looks like Air Force One. So why is Pelosi getting off of Air Force One in Taiwan? But at any rate, Juan's whole point about Pelosi going to Taiwan is couched in what's going on right now in the States with Biden. And so there's a couple interesting things. I don't know if some of you saw the video. This is a few weeks ago, someone asking Alexa about when Biden fell off his bicycle, and Alexa was saying, Biden died at Bethesda Medical Hospital on, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what? Now, that doesn't happen anymore with Alexa. They may have manually changed it, but people were testing this out and it was happening. So it's very confusing. And, because these computer systems, these AI, just pulls from data. So there may have been some data out there that indicated, they maybe had some files at Bethesda Medical, or I don't know. It's very weird. It's spooky. But the point here is that I don't know that Biden's dead. I don't think anybody knows that for certain. And most people will probably say he's not dead. But I can tell you that if he's not dead, he has cancer. Because he said that himself. And I also have a personal source who, confirmed it on his own. He has a close colleague who is not like anywhere conspiratorial like us, who's actually was involved in Democratic machine stuff, and basically confirmed, yeah, he has cancer. He has colon cancer. So Biden is on the way out, if he's not already on the way out. And why I say, is he already on the way out? The point is that they may not announce it until later, partly for their, numerology kind of shit, so that he can die on a certain day, but also so that they can set all the preparations in place. And Juan used as an example the stuff with Hillary Clinton after she had that seizure or whatever. Remember that famous one in 2016? And then she came out the next day, but that wasn't actually her. That was a body double. There's no Secret Service. And it is true that Hillary has a very well-known body double. So the point is, like, this stuff shouldn't be controversial to people. I think that the cloning stuff is way too off in the weeds. I'm not going to say it doesn't, maybe it's not possible, but people have made the point very saliently that, okay, even if you could clone somebody, but they would not be the same person, and they would be, 50 whatever years younger so the point is, you don't need to do cloning when you have face masks like we see in Mission Impossible that totally fit to face, and voice modulators. There's no reason to even think in the room of that's a clone. You can just have a body double. You can have somebody who gets a bit of plastic surgery done, gets some makeup, who's an actor, and then you can give them a voice modulator, you can give them a mask, different situations, you can use CGI. There's a lot of different ways to pull off the illusion, is the point. So the thing here is that whether Biden's dead or not, he's going to be out soon. And you can see them all prepping for this. He's had COVID on and off the last few days. Nobody can see him. What does that mean? What does it mean? Has it been seen? What does it mean? So, what the point here is that after he's gone, who's going to come next? You have all these different mafias, right? The New York, Chicago, San Francisco mafia is all jockeying for power. And so Juan's point here is that Pelosi going to Taiwan, was kind of meant for her to sort of make this impression and make herself look strong, and so that she would look tough on China. And that, it's all just a mirage, because China's not going to do anything, because China's working with them. Now, here's the point that I am going to now dispute what Juan insinuated here. Because Juan's insinuation was that because China and, a lot of these Democratic politicians have worked together to sell in America that they're working together, and that China is working with, the World Economic Forum and everything to, whatever, bring down the West. My contention is that that's not necessarily so clear cut. Or rather, let me put it this way: China clearly was working with them, but is China going to go with them the full way, or are they going to double cross them? The issue with these mafia politicians in the West is that they have no problem selling out their own country to places like China. Like, oh yeah, you do the manufacturing, whatever. Um, they have no problem selling out their own countries, but they still talk to the Chinese like they are the ones who we can push around. So you have the situation where the Chinese maybe work with them because it was in China's interest. And honestly, I think China was still kind of hedging. But when Russia, and Trump's big job was actually to try to separate Russia from China, because Trump knew that China, or at least large portions of the Communist Party in China, were working with the World Economic Forum. I don't think Trump was convinced that Xi himself was sold on the World Economic Forum. But there was a lot of, obviously, connections to this whole thing, and they wanted to collapse the West and then have a small Asian workforce, and that would have been the, kill 13 out of 14 people. But as that plan has started to collapse, and I think especially once Russia broke the backs of the Western countries with the sanctions, and seeing how much more adept they are militarily, I think China started to think to themselves, these World Economic Forum people, this is a sinking ship. And rather than kind of hedge our bets between Russia and Europe, and Russia and the West, they're going more into the camp of Russia. And I think this is especially the case now that Pelosi just did this in Taiwan. So now we have reports from Politico, which is of course, fucking Politico, but we have all these reports and information that the people in the State Department genuinely think that China is still with them, and that, oh yeah, it's just for show, back channeling, everything's fine, back channeling. But the thing is, in Chinese culture in particular, I mean, it's a universal human truth, but in Chinese culture in particular, public humiliation, saving face, is very, very important. And so when China says this is an absolute red line for us, and the West not only says, oh, we dare you, and by the way, now we're going to send more congressional delegations. After China didn't do anything, now you have all sorts of European countries, UK, Germany, they're going to send their, prime ministers there, their government officials there. Now they're when the U.S. wants to send a congressional delegation to Taiwan. And so, but they're so arrogant that they're thinking, haha, we just pulled one off on them. And now we're in, and they're not going to really do anything. They're just bluffing. This was stated in the Political article that essentially the State Department does not really believe that China's going to do anything. And I think, to Juan's point, they don't think they're going to do anything because they think, oh, China's all working with us. We're all working together. But this doesn't make sense when you look at what is actually going on globally with China's Belt and Road Initiative and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and just it's incredible. I mean, Pepe Escobar talks a lot about this, but incredible development of infrastructure and trade routes all across Asia, and now expanding into the BRICS, expanding into South America, Argentina, Paraguay, trying to bring Mercosur in the mix, and also the African Union. So what's really clear is that China and Russia are working very, very strongly together. And now the West just humiliated China. So China is not going to be able to let that fly. They're not going to be able to let that fly, especially because you know as well as I do that they're going to keep provoking China, because once they find some kind of weakness in someone, they just keep pushing it, pushing it, pushing it until that person lashes out. I mean, they're fucking crazy. People are fucking crazy. I mean, look at it's amazing how right after Blinken visits Kosovo and Albania, like 5 days later, now you have some issue in Kosovo with the ethnic Serbs there, which of course, if Ukraine's like Russia's little sister, Serbia's like its little cousin. And so it's like, now you're bullying my little cousin. And Serbia can't really do anything because it's landlocked around NATO. So this whole thing, this whole chaos, I mean, I'm just telling you guys, I see it coming to war. I see all the groundwork being laid for war. So we have all this stuff I just talked about geopolitically that's aligning towards it. And then you have what else? You have China is about to go through an economic crisis. All the stuff from Evergrande we talked about last fall is finally starting to come to roost. There's been some bank riots. China's economy is extraordinarily fragile right now, and it is going to break. At this point, you have a lot of individuals who were in the mortgage market who are just saying they don't want to pay their mortgages anymore. They don't even care about their investments. They don't want to pay their mortgages anymore, even though the mortgages are like underwater. They just don't want to put any more into the sinking investment. So the pyramid scheme itself, with all these, empty capital investments, that's coming down. And so if you're China and you have a serious economic situation on your hands, you have an incentive to go to war to distract your own public. Now we have the next piece here, which is that if you are actually having a change of power in the United States right now, then internally, domestically, the United States is distracted. So you have a distracted adversary going through a change of power. You have domestic issues you need to distract from. And you have the fact that you need to make a response at some point. Do you wait and chance it out? What do you do? I mean, my perspective is that I think the Chinese are going to do it. I see them doing it. I see them, and I think that there's going to be more provocations before they finally pull the trigger, but they've moved enormous amounts of military hardware to Fujian, which is right across from Taiwan, right across the straits. And I think it's all pre-positioned. They're now doing a big military build-up, and I think they're going to invade this fall. My guess is it will be in October, because in October is the invasion season. Now, I could be wrong about this. They started their first round of sanctions against Taiwan. I think they sanctioned sand. They're not exporting sand. Let's just run through the economics here for a second. 80-90% of what Taiwan gets comes from China. So Taiwan's heavily dependent economically on China. You could argue that China doesn't even have to invade to break Taiwan. And then you have the fact that the U.S. gets a lot of its microchips, most of its actual microchips from Taiwan. And so there's another security reason for China to go in there and to do something. But let's talk about economic war. So GDP is a garbage metric. It's, mostly propped up by consumption. And so you have countries that literally just buy crap, and that says that, okay, your country's healthier because you just buy useless crap. If you look at it from economic metrics, U.S. and Russia are on similar, position, essentially. And China's about 8 to 10 times bigger than the United States. So from what I've seen, the United States can be considered between number 2 and number 4 in the world, depending on how you want to measure it. I think it's realistic. Let's say number 2. I think it's a stretch to push it down much further, but a very distant number 2, and kind of maybe tied with Russia, which is pretty catastrophic from a war standpoint, because people think like, well, in World War III, in World War II, America retooled and moved everything into They got all the factories going. Well, we had factories. They maybe weren't producing a lot of stuff, but we had factories and we could convert them. If you can make cars, you can make Jeeps. But we don't produce that stuff anymore, and China produces it in loads. And so, the amount of things that we get from China, I mean, so many small little things, medicine, random spare parts. If there's war with China, I mean, it's going to be an economic catastrophe. It's going to be an inconceivable economic catastrophe, and it will take the decade for the United States to climb its way out of it. And that is what I think is going to happen, because that's where all signs are pointing to. We don't have a stable world order again until the 2030s. And we are going to have a massive, massive collapse. And this is how you get the economic collapse. Another point Tom Luongo is making is that, because he's of the, if you guys recall, Tom Luongo's of the position that the Fed is not in line with Davos, and that they do not want Davos to be raising rates. And so going to start a war with China is a way to force the Fed to start printing money again. And that's true. It's probably the only thing that these politicians can do to start to make the Fed, to make sure that we get hyperinflation, to make sure we get printing, heavy money printing. So I see it all coming together. Unfortunately to say, I see it all coming together. And I also say this: with all this political chaos that's going to be going on, and with the increasing fraud coming out in the primaries, we may not even have elections, or the elections may be delayed in November. That's looking more and more like a realistic possibility. So it's not just that we're going to have all sorts of fraud and stuff stolen, that we will actually have a delayed election. So we'll see what's going to happen. But I can tell you guys, it feels to me like it felt in January of this year, before things really started to... You remember February, big tensions. I mean, I'm kind of seeing similar stuff, like, as we get to the end of this month and certainly into September, we're going to start to see tensions really rise. There's supposed to be a train strike in the United States. We're supposed to start to have the real supply shortages of diesel. I mean, enjoy August, because I think August is like maybe the last real breath that we have before things start to really heat up in September, and then everything just starts to blow apart in October. It really feels like that's the direction things are going. And of course, it's tough to say. There's so many different little wild cards that could be thrown out here, but I think we're coming to our denouement. But when I say denouement, I mean this is when we really say goodbye to the old, because okay, what's going on between Russia and Ukraine? That's a serious war. We have huge numbers of Ukrainians dead. I mean, probably 60,000 dead at this point. But it's just nothing compared to what happens if China sinks some carrier groups. I mean, it's just nothing. And you know what happens is that China and the U.S. go to war. And look, it may not be that China even... Maybe they do a preemptive strike, or maybe the U.S., provokes them to the point where it's like almost plausible that they're going to do it. Just like, Russia invaded Ukraine because in the week prior to the invasion, they started shelling the Donbass 5 times. I mean, it was the heaviest shelling since the Donbass war started, and it was going up day after day after day, increasing. So, I mean, they were preparing for an invasion of the area, and Russia then attacked. Would China be pushed into a similar situation? I mean, the Chinese are not impulsive. So I don't think that, that's why they didn't attack now. They're going to see what happens. But I think at this point, they're committed to fighting, and they're going to take their chances. Now, everyone's going to be freaked out about nuclear war, as they should be. But I mean, the only thing that I can say for certain, I'll say this like with such a strong confidence, is that The cabal doesn't have access to the nukes, and then that is the connection to the Q operation. I don't think that they have, like, the Q group has huge amounts of power. I just think that they have the nukes. And one of the things that Juan's talked about is this fight between senior executive service, which is basically the continuity of government that is the deep state, the people who have salaries but you can't fire them, and who control everything behind the scenes, administration to administration, and the other continuity of government, which is from 1954, which goes to this, nuclear group, people with the Q, which is an energy Department of Energy sector, security clearance, and that in the event of attack, they're the ones who get control. And so one of the things that Juan has talked about is that as we get to this Cuban Missile Crisis situation, that is when the Q group would actually be given, legal rights to decide, to act, basically. We'll see about that. I frankly consider a lot of these legal arguments to be a little, beat your dick off kind of shit. I'm not saying that they don't entirely matter. Like, I get it, but I think that there's probably been enough legal thresholds passed that they could act. It's just that the time isn't right. So, yeah, I think we got a storm of brewing, and it's going to be rough. Look, I love Tate, and I think that he's blowing up, and he's blowing up big, and I think he's aware of the risks around him, the threats around him, and that's all I'll say. He's a big boy. He can take care of himself. He knows what he's getting into, and he knows he's got plenty of people who support him. But yeah, they certainly, he's got some very serious enemies, and I'm sure they're scheming to take him down, and they might try to push him up high to then try to take him down. But we'll continue to pray for his safety. But he's very competent in that regard. He's got good security, so I'm sure he'll be good. So you guys have any questions about anything I just mentioned here with this show? Like I said, I'm trying to keep it pretty focused, but I wanted to talk about this because I can just see it all coming together now. I can see everything moving to this point. I mean, to Alan's comment here, we don't really produce that much. It's certainly not compared to what we consume. It's a financial services economy, and our really big weapon is that we just have control of the financial system. But we've already set in motion the process where that's going to end. And so you have real economic forces versus, control over the financial stuff. I used the analogy before of what's more valuable, the physical server or the software on it. And they're both valuable, obviously, but you can create new software, but if you don't have any raw materials, you can't create a new server. That's an interesting question, Alan. Yeah, cyber attack risk. I think 100% cyber attack stuff is going to be in here. I mean, there was even some prior to Pelosi's landing from China against Taiwan. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of cyber warfare. There's going to be outages and whatnot. The Geds link, I was just using his article as a stepping stone, just talking about how we've been waiting for so long. It's almost going to be weird when stuff does start to hit the fan, because then it's like, holy crap, all these pieces on the board that have been moved there, and us just waiting, and now we're going to finally see some action. It's going to start to really break out into the open. I mean, what's going to happen with it? So I think it happens in Taiwan. I also think, I wonder, save Israel for last. Does that mean that Israel is the last country to get, the last front to get pulled into the war? because we also have the Iran-Israel front. So you can really just see anywhere in the globe where there's tension, I think that you're going to see conflict erupt. I mean, so let's see here. We have Russia, Ukraine, then we have China, Taiwan, then we have Russia, Ukraine will then expand maybe because Russia and China have a defense pact. So if they attack China, then this spills out into all-out war. Then Russia expands its attack into NATO and Europe. And then you have Israel and Iran get into a fight because Israel will attack Russian allies in Syria and Iran, and then they'll respond. And then you have North Korea and South Korea because South Korea and Japan are connected to the West. So, and then you have potentially even Pakistan and India. Now that Pakistan's been overthrown, maybe they have an attack, Pakistan attacks India. And so you actually genuinely have a true world war. As usual, South America, skating out of it. I don't really see much going on in South America. but you can see right here, you have the Balkans blow up again, Serbia, Kosovo. We also have, Iran, Azerbaijan, Armenia, that there'll just be conflicts erupting all over the world, and it'll somehow get pulled into this whole thing. And you can see it happening. Let me just see some of the other questions here. Do you think Trump comes back or no? Yeah, I think Trump comes back. But, I mean, we have to think about this for a second, about what the U.S. is what state the U.S. is gonna be in. The U.S. government is gonna have to be reconstituted. I guess it depends how it goes down, but that's a possibility that we'll have some sort of military continuity of governance. Assuming the Q people make it, and they're the ones who wrestle control, and the U.S. is gonna there's just so much muck to clean up. I mean, when we talk about it's just going to go to, I don't think that we have any confirmation about when there's going to be elections back online again. I'm very optimistic about the United States ultimately. So I could see a delayed election or canceled midterms, and then maybe some really big election in 2024, big constitutional Congress. I think that the second half of this decade is going to be a lot of restructuring of North America in spheres of influence. I mean, like I've said before, I expect U.S., Canada, and Greenland to merge together. But we're not going to be an empire anymore, which is good because fuck empire. I mean, the burden of empire. Like, what is being an empire got in the United States? It's been a fucking disaster. It's been a disaster. So I think it would be the U.S. and Canada merged together. That's right. That is what makes sense. Both in terms of history, correcting history, but also just, in terms of being a real continental resource powerhouse, really secure. The Arctic is all set up. I mean, the only, Canada was made to stymie the expansion of the United States. Like, that was the whole design behind it. It was a British client state. So when that whole legacy is done, I see the merger of it. And the combined resources of U.S. and Canada together would really be substantive. So, but yeah, Trump comes back. I do strongly believe that. But Trump's going to get arrested. I'm glad that you mentioned this because it sparked it. But the whole commission is designed to lead to Trump's arrest. So I think that's another thing that we can throw in the mix. Because remember, they want the public. They know they can't capture the United States fully, and they know they're losing power. So they're going to do everything they can to try to spark a civil war so we fight each other rather than keep our focus on them and purging them. That's where we're at. So I think a Trump arrest is highly, highly likely. Trump will be the first arrest that shocks the world. And yeah, I think that's coming this fall too. So we're getting there. Um, let's see here. Could you elaborate more on the internal change or sensations you experience when you sense a timeline shift with the rapidly escalating environment we're in? Um, it's a really good, it's a good question. So I don't know that there's like, I don't want to like BS this answer too much. I mean, the internal shifts are more just like I have seen people with a lot of patterns that they've carried for a while just drop them. Remarkable amounts of shifts. And so when you see that stuff happen, it could just be, the planet. I mean, the planet's spinning faster. Like there's a lot of stuff that's going on with the planet as we've talked about as we go through this ascension process. A lot of new energies coming in. These energies are changing people who are receptive to them. So if you are a receiver and if you're opening yourself up to receiving these new energies, then I mean, they're affecting you anyway, but you can use them constructively if you're open to receiving them. And so a lot of people are opening up just from that. Um, the timeline related stuff, it's really, the best way I can describe that is something is a really clear trajectory, and then all of a sudden, um, it's like there's a fork, and then you're like, whoa, how are we over here? Now this whole thing is happening. And that's a lot of what they do is they try to manipulate those little minor timelines. Um, I've felt this more on personal levels than on um, like how do I put this? You can start to feel the energy move towards a certain outcome, and then they'll maybe redirect it. Something else will happen. Great example of this was with the truckers in Canada and how all that stuff is building, and then you have the war with Russia. Like you could see stuff start to manifest there. It about to blow up across the U.S. and then it's like, nope, we're not going to do that. We'll go over here. But the issue for them right now is that while in the past it maybe worked to be able to change these timelines, to deflect energy to a different, to a different timeline. At this point, there's so much, everything's converging, and so it's kind of like it doesn't make a difference because it all kind of will happen anyway. I mean, there's gonna be mass uprisings at some point, I'm sure. I'm just not calling for it. I'm just seeing the writing on the wall. I mean, I'm gonna be chilling here, chilling here in the house, hunkering down. But you can see. I mean, if you get war with China, the economic damage that will do, and the moral damage that will do. I mean, it's just so hard to comprehend the pain, and nobody is prepared for it except for us. Yeah, I think the U.S. is going to be reconstituted. Charlie Ward is a total bullshitter. So yeah, I think that that's a really good point. I mean, in general, I don't listen to any of the truthers anymore, um, except for Wano Savin. He's the only one who I think, and he's actually unlike most of these other people. He's actually on the ground. I mean, that's not something he's bullshitting. That's a well established fact. He's on the ground. Um, so I think the perspective that he puts out there, he has his own twist that he puts on things, and you always have to control for this. You can't look at his word as gospel, but I think he's got credibility, and he's got connections, he's got insight. I mean, Charlie Ward is literally a grifter. He's a grifter. I mean, as Cliff High said, he's a money launderer. Like he would talk about his job was flying money in private planes and then exchanging them for gold elsewhere. It's like, why would you need to do that? I mean, they could just do that with a wire. So why are you having to physically transport it on private planes? Charlie Ward is just like a scammer, basically. And I don't know what's wrong with Simon Parks, but his brain is totally like, I don't know if he's a grifter too or if he's like just Looney Tunes. But yeah, no, all those people are just best case scenario. They're regurgitating what other stuff is out there, and most of it's really fanciful. Uh, I think we're grown ups here. We've talked about this before, but year one, I think it was excusable. I mean, I'll just say, I think a lot of us thought in that first year that, wow, stuff really, is going to happen. And we were just naive. We had our minds open, but we didn't have our discernment honed. And we fell for a lot of bullshit with varying consequences. And now there's a lot more wisdom that we have. And you can just see a lot of these people, I mean, like gene decode. Like, what the fuck are these people talking about? Like, there's just a lot of bullshit that flies around the truther community. And there's certain people who don't want to learn from it. And they just want to continue. It feels good, so they're going to keep spreading around. I also will tell you that when I hear people go around and spread really, really negative information, I just immediately assume that there's some intelligence asset, because what they're doing is it's just demoralization propaganda. And they come in there and they'll say, no one's doing anything. And this is, I just, guy comes out of left field and with all the secret intel and how they've been betrayed. I just usual bullshit. You got to use a big filter. Like I said, really just the only person who I even bother listening to is Juan O'Savin, and I don't think he has the full picture, but he has some interesting pieces, and it really makes sense. It puts part of the puzzle together. Kind of off topic, but do you have any thoughts on cartels in Mexico? Ever think we will see U.S. military action to solve that issue? Well, maybe. I mean, the cartels, without the cabal, the cartels won't exist anymore because they're all mafias, right? I just want to make the point here that I'm not trying to be super naive. I mean, we deal with the cabal in America. It's not like world peace, everything's perfect. I mean, there's going to be so much cleanup, and that's going to be when we regain control of the country. But I mean, we're going to be regain control of a country that's just broken, and the world itself is going to be broken in many ways. So there's going to be a lot of power vacuums, but these cartels are not going to be getting the same kind of support. I mean, if you're being funded by American intelligence agencies, like, that's how they've gotten to be so big. And by the way, part of the reason for it is that it's helped to destabilize Mexico, because we want to keep Mexico weak. Because if we keep Mexico weak, then it's not going to be a threat to us. I mean, that's one of the reasons that you see this Mexican president moving towards China and Russia, because they understand that the U.S. has been destabilizing Mexico for a long period of time. So, I mean, honestly, we're real pieces of shit. Like, Americans are great, Heartland America, whatever, is great, but this political class is pure evil. I mean, honestly, it's really humbling when you realize just what disgusting shit we've been doing to the rest of the world, how much chaos we've sown. I mean, it really does make, it's like, I love my country, but I don't want to, I think that we need to really look at ourselves in the mirror. And whenever I hear this, like, rah rah America stuff, I mean, right now I guess that's how the left felt during the Iraq War, wasn't it? So I get them, and they were right, so if I were China, I would release the fraud Epstein data to the U.S. population, create internal struggle, hit cyber attack, and invade while striking Hawaii. Yeah. I mean, the only thing I would say here, though, and this is important, is things get nuclear when we start to have hits on civilian populations and just home territory. So China sinks carrier groups, hits some military bases, there's not going to be a nuclear strike. China decides to start bombing Honolulu, there's going to be you're going to start to really see that. That's a different story, because now it's like, okay, we got to inflict civilian casualties. I don't think that they're going to go to that point. I don't think they're going to go to that point. Maybe that's naive. Maybe that's naive. But I think it's going to be so shocking. They might hit the naval base in Hawaii. I mean, right now we have 3 carrier groups in Taiwan and 1 in Hawaii. So, plausible. But that's a long... I don't know... It's probably... My suspicion is that they won't hit U.S. mainland. Because that'll be perceived as an escalation. I think that the farthest that they would hit would be Guam. Because they actually consider Guam to be part of their outer security zone. So I could see, I don't know if this will actually happen, but I could see, like, in some peace treaty that the U.S. would have to give up Guam and the Marianas to China. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, and I don't think the U.S. will give it up, but possibility. Let's see here. To be completely fair, it absolutely felt like something was going to happen, yeah. Thank you, Jeff. They're raw. I sincerely thought Pelosi's visit to Taiwan was the moment. Thought they'd shoot her plane down and we'd nuke CCP. Yeah, I know Gonzalo Lira was talking a lot about that, but I think we all felt that it was a turning point, but I didn't feel at that moment they were going to do something. I mean, it would have felt disproportionate. Like, not that China couldn't do it and that they wouldn't have leverage, but Russia, especially with Lavrov, like the best, probably the most impressive secretaries. I mean, certainly of the 21st century, but he's up there with Metternich and Bismarck and Kissinger. I mean, just absolutely incredible foreign minister. There's been really a desire, and I think this is where Russia's influence has been good, because, look, I've said this before, I have respect for Russia. I know people living in Russia. Yeah, it's a security state, but it's freer than here in many ways. In many ways, I mean, certainly freer than continental Europe. I don't know, maybe not the United States. Kind of depends on what you mean by freer, I suppose. Depends on what measurement. But let's just say they're not any worse than we are. And, they do still have Western values in the classical sense. Not the fucking Western values today, which is like having a tranny twerk on you. But China is a communist state. China's I do not want the CCP controlling anything in the world. And I think what's actually been really good about all this is that Russia is smaller than China in power, but Russia's military is, I think, better than China's. It's certainly more tested. China's military doesn't have experience. Russia's military is very effective and tested. Most of China's military technology, I don't want to say all of it, but a lot of its key stuff has come from Russia. So Russia's like economically solid, but it's militarily super dominant. Whereas China's economically super dominant, but its military, it's kind of uncertain at this point how well it's going to perform. I expect that they're going to suffer some serious casualties in a war with the United States, unlike Russia. I think Russia is way more prepared to not lose casualties, but I think China will lose quite a few. I mean, I think, they can sink 3 carrier groups, but how many planes are they going to lose in the process? They will lose a lot of planes in the process. But will they do it? Yeah, I think that they will do it. They could do it. They can afford to take losses. They have the manpower. I mean, hell, they have a 20% excess of male population in that generation that they can use. They have excess of manpower, and they have industrial capacity to replace things, which the U.S. does not. Anything the U.S. loses, it can't replace. So, but anyway, that's kind of a tangent. The big point here is that I don't think that I think that China is in many ways Russia's sort of setting the tone for how the world is going to be reorganized, and the way that Russia is setting the tone is very inclusive. It's very much like, look at the Western hypocrisy, look at how the West acts. The West doesn't act responsibly in the global order. If China were to shoot down Pelosi's plane or immediately go and sink all these carriers like Gonzalo suggested, they wouldn't come across as being responsible in the world, and so it wouldn't. And you could say, well, who cares? We're at war, but I actually don't think. I don't think it would sell well. Like, you do need to still win global hearts and minds because the whole world has to unite against this Western order in order to help break it. So if you have a lot of countries just go completely neutral, and maybe they don't want to, maybe they pull back from China much more than they would have. I don't know. I don't think it's a sound move, especially because, as Russia's proven, if you understand the psychology of your opponent, they're going to hurt themselves. I mean, Russia's barely done anything to affect the West right now on its own. I mean, they will this fall. They've already started a little bit with the gas. Oh, we can't get the turbines. Sorry, you only get 20% of the gas that you should have gotten. But they're like toying with them. It's China, like, they have a lot of cards to still play, and there's no reason for China to rush it, especially because all eyes were on it. I mean, the U.S. was at high alert, so anything China sent against the U.S. would have been, they were watching for it. Whereas I think it's more likely to happen after a lull. Like, if you remember with the Russian invasion, they thought they kept saying the Russians are going to invade, the Russians are going to invade, the Russians are going to invade, and then the Russians didn't invade. And then it was like, okay, maybe they're not going to invade. Well, we'll go and attack anyway. And then the Russians invaded. So I think it'll be something similar like that. And honestly, it's possible that they won't even physically invade Taiwan this fall because, maybe they don't feel ready. They just got their third carrier out, and it needs to have its flight crews trained. They probably can get it ready in time for that, but we'll see. I think October feels right, so we'll see. Yeah, China does have 20% more men than women, at least in that generation. In the generation that's like millennial generation in China, it's 20% more men because of the one China policy. I don't know if it's the case overall in the country or if it's just in that generation, but it's certainly still like a 10% differential across the entire country. And yeah, so they got plenty of men who, they're happy to throw into the meat grinder. So anyway, guys, I think any last quick questions? I mean, I think we pretty much covered it. We're going to see what happens, but big moves on the geopolitical front, and shit keeps ratcheting up. Yeah, one-child policy was gnarly, and maybe a mistake, but anyway, we'll see what happens with the whole thing. Appreciate you guys as always. We'll see you next time.